Perfect. All right. So with that, so our intent, is to really kind of have these focus groups be a first step in kind of figuring out a student journey. And so all of you as representatives from your various schools that work a lot with students, whether on a career level, student disability support level, student life level, whatever it may be, we want to be able to hear from you and be able for you to kind of share what you know about you think is the student journey in a very authentic space. We want you to kind of get in the mind frame of not only thinking about what we think a student journey is as administrators, but also to kind of putting yourself in the shoes of the students and kind of thinking to yourself of what is a student kind of experience? What are the touch points of different things that they might come across? We will be recording these sessions. They are for review for us later, so that we as a team can get back together, go over anything that was missed, look, review any of the statements that were made by all of you. And what we will do is compile all this information along with the student groups and student survey data that we're going to be doing. Student groups are next week, student survey data after that, with a presentation to give to Farouk Day in the Office of Integrative Learning Life Design, followed then by doing some presentations to the ILLD leadership, and then also to at the mini retreat that we're planning to have at early May. I put the agenda in in the chat session, but we're going to start with some rounds of introductions with an icebreaker question that you can be thinking about. After that, we're going to do a rosebud thorn exercise, and then do some brainstorming about current state versus future state of a student journey. We'll be using Jamboard to facilitate the interactive parts of this, and Jess would either be sending to you, putting into the chat the link for the Jamboard, and she'll explain kind of what that would look like. Before we get started, are there any questions or anything that I can clarify before we get started? Perfect. All right, so I'll start with the introduction. So, if you don't know, I'm Paul Hutchinson. I'm Director of Career Services at the Bloomberg School of Public Health. And what we can ask that you do is just come up with an answer to the question that's there in the chat. And so my answer to this question is that all students should be able to make a powerful impact by connecting to opportunities beyond the classroom. So if I see that, we're mainly responsible for making those connections for them, and opportunities can be any number of different things. But I really think, that's a minimum thing that I think students should expect to be able to get. Now pass it over to Jess to have her introduce herself.
Thanks, Paul. So hi, my name is Jess Harley. I'm the life design educator for student athletes in the life design lab on the Homewood campus. And so I've been here a little bit over a year and I'm very excited to be part of this team. For my answer to the minimum expectation is that students would have access to networking opportunities with alumni. Networking opportunities are great for them to be able to learn more about their career journey or kind of career journeys they think they want to go to or go down, but also opportunities for experiences like Paul mentioned, so internships, shadowing, volunteer experiences overall. And then I will pass it on to Laura.
Hi everyone, I'm Laura Arthur. I'm Director of Career Lab at the School of Nursing. I've been in that role for 5 years, but I've been at Hopkins for 10. So I was previously at Carey in their career development office. And I think a minimum expectation would be that students have opportunities to pursue things that are of interest to them, or even more broadly discover things that are of interest to them. And that could be through volunteering, researching, part-time work, or service.
I'll go across. So Rebecca, go ahead.
Hi everyone. So my name is Rebecca Stringham for AAP, Advanced Academic Programs, she, her pronouns. As I said just earlier, it's my third month of being here in this position as the Student Success Manager, brand new role that was created to better support our grad students here. As a background fun fact though, I am a Hopkins alum in undergrad. I did go to I was in Homewood in class 2014. So actually, Jess, I don't know if you work with Andrea Weissman at all, but she was in Res Life and I was already underneath her. So I came back full circle almost 10 years later. So really happy to be here. But to the ask your question, my first thought is just I want to make sure that students know that they aren't alone. I think especially when it comes to graduate level, it's like, hey, you're an adult now, handle everything on your own. But I do still think no matter what age you are, you just need support through this process. So making sure that our students know that they do still have resources and they still have people who can help guide them on wherever their journey may be. And yay for former RAs. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. Brittany?
Hi, y'all. Brittany Clarid, she, her pronouns. I have been here at Hopkins for a little over 7 years now, but been at the Bloomberg School of Public Health as the Director of Student Life since this past June of 2021. I would say a minimum expectation for me is that students feel that they have a resource of or a network of support and resources to guide them through their journey here at Hopkins, and that network has some depth and breadth, and students know how to access that. So that's something I've been working on in this role and in roles previous I've held at the institution.
Great. And Jenny?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Ettinger, and I am in the Student Disability Services Office. Centrally from, I handle CARE and SICE students with disabilities and accommodations. And prior to that, I was at the School of Education and Career Services for over 10 years. So I'm in a new role, but very familiar with some of what we're going to be discussing. And I feel that for a minimum expectation would be, to provide resources for students academically, socially, emotionally, like through connecting them with other students. I think students expect to have opportunities to engage with other students, but also with their faculty in research and trying things out. I think just connecting is, I think, a kind of a essential expectation for students.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. And thank you to Jenny. Jenny's not even at education any longer, but she's kind of filling in at the time. But we do appreciate you taking the time to participate in this. All right, so now we're going to go on to our next kind of exercise. And we'll use the Jamboard for this, and just to kind of give you some guiding questions and then have you kind of put some reactions in there. So I'll let Jess kind of show you what the Jamboard is and how it works, and then we'll get started with answering those questions.
Awesome, thanks, Paul. How many of you have used Jamboard before? I'd just like to see. Okay, cool, that's awesome, no problem. So I will share my screen. I just dropped the link in the chat. So you should be able to click that link and access Jamboard. So you can see on this first slide, we just have some questions at the top of the slide. So the first question we have is, what has been working well and preparing students for their post-graduation plan? And that can be really anything from them expecting to want to go to a career, going to furthering their education, or continuing in higher ed, or whatever it is. We really just want to see kind of what things are you all doing that really have been working well in this world. So right here, you can see it's underneath the big select button. This is a little sticky note button. You can click the sticky note, and we're just going to have different colors for each of you. So Laura, you're going to be yellow. Jenny, you're going to be green. Rebecca, you're going to be blue. And Brittany, you're going to be pink.
Actually,
and the reason.
Hold up, Jess, I put it in the chat. I assigned everybody the colors already. Sorry.
Oh, okay, perfect. Sorry, I didn't see.
Sorry about that. Yep.
So whatever color that Paul put in the chat, that is perfectly fine. With which color you're going to do, and we just want to have different colors because this will allow us to see maybe some of the differences that are happening amongst schools. We are not looking to see, oh, Laura's doing the most amazing things. Like, we're gonna report back to Farouk that that's what's happening. So it has nothing to do with your name. It really is just for us to know the school that you are kind of representing in kind of this discussion. So our goal is for you to put down as many sticky notes as you can in whatever color it is that you are assigned, and just for anything that is working well, and you will have a 1.5-minute timer that will be going, and then we will move on to the next section, which you can see here at the top. You'll just click that arrow to that next frame. But right now we're just focused on this first frame for that 1.5 minutes, and then Paul will kind of instruct us when we want to move on to that second frame. Are there any questions in how to use Jamboard or add a sticky note, or kind of what you're going to be putting on the sticky notes?
And is it one idea per note?
Correct. Yeah, one idea per note. These can be, large kind of ideas. It could be like scalable events, or it could be specifically like that resume workshop I did was fantastic, or career fair that we had was great.
So
And
we're
Jenny-
able to access these sticky notes. I just don't see where.
Yes,
so
they should
that
be
is-
right on that left-hand side of your note. And so if you type something like networking, maybe it's working really well,
Right.
you just hit save.
Okay.
And then the sticky note you can see is automatically on here. You don't have to worry about moving the sticky notes. I will be in the background just moving them so we can see them all. So your goal is just to write as many. So you could say career fairs, you could say one-on-one meetings. And so you see how they kind of overlap. I'll be moving them around
Okay.
and you don't have to worry about it.
Thanks.
And I will delete my options out there so you have all of yours. But I think, Paul, are we good to go?
Yep, go right ahead. I'll give you about a 30-second warning when we're getting close, but yeah, go ahead and fill up the Jamboard, please.
Our ancestors had a mystical connection with red pandas, and what was a blessing became. All right, so if you have more things you want to add in, please feel free to go right ahead. You can go back to some of these if you have another idea or something you didn't get a chance to write in, please feel free to do that. You'll use the same color sticky note all the way through, so for all the different Jamboards. So if you can go over to the next slide. And so now the question is going to be, what has not been working well in preparing students for their post-graduation plans? So, thinking about the challenges or obstacles and things like that that you've had, or things that you wish were working better. We'll give it, again, another 1.5 minutes to kind of think through some of those too.
And these can be obstacles or pain points that you have as well. So anything like that.
All right. So now we're gonna go over to our next or our third part. What are the opportunities that exist in preparing students for their post-graduation plans? So where are their chances to try things? So if you can think about those for about a minute and a half, we will go back review each one of these and just do some dialogue and discussion around each of them. But if for right now, you can kind of concentrate on what do you think are the opportunities that exist in preparing students for their post-graduation plans. I'll give you about a minute and a half to do that as well. All right, so that's all for that one. So now what we're just going to go back and do is, go back to the first question, kind of review some of the responses, see if we see that there's any similarities. Maybe it generates some more thoughts for you in terms of what are things that are kind of in common. So trying to read some of the. Brittany, what does your first one say there? Yeah, thanks.
So I was saying essentially the fact that our students' identity is so centralized in their department means that they're getting high levels of exposure to their field. So they're really getting integrated into that work at a department level.
And does anybody have anything here that they're, really believe is working well for their unique student population?
Or see things that might be similar that you're like, oh yeah, I forgot to put that, but I agree that's really working well for our students as well.
So like Laura, I see like your coaching has a great net promoter score. Is it? So that was one thing that was certainly brought up in one of the other groups, is that it's a high impact thing, but it's also a time, it's time consuming. So I don't know if that's the same experience that you have with that.
I think it's manageable. I mean, we try to offer a lot of group content. I think it's just for us too, our programs are so specialized and it's so diverse in terms of how much experience somebody has. So I think we also want to accommodate the individual needs or questions that students have.
Great. And Rebecca, Jenny, any thoughts on anything here?
I think I see a trend of students be able to connect to faculty. Just because like the same over here in AEP, a lot of number of programs are specific to a certain part of like the career field, or even like within some of our programs, there's like literally 15 different concentrations a student can focus in. So having professors who are also very niche in their field, I think can help students feel that, oh, like I can do something with this degree because this professor, or like, these people I'm meeting through these classes, like also have the same interest as me in this specific part of the world or world of like study or work.
And they can use professors as kind of barometers of the type of work they might want to do, not just from their strictly academic research side of things that they do. Yeah. And Jenny, you had here about kind of the networking with alumni and the mentoring program. The School of Ed have a mentoring program?
We did for years. We had
Okay.
A specific, mentoring program for students that were in I believe their final year. So it was a year-long mentoring program.
Oh, wow.
And I think last year, right before I left, is when it folded into the university-wide mentoring program. But it worked really well for students. They had a mentor that they worked closely with, an alum from their program, and really had some good response and results through those connections.
Great. Thanks. Okay. Any other kind of reactions, feedback on anything here? Anything else that bubbles up? Okay. Then we'll go to the next slide. So again, here, certainly looking at what are the things that have not been working well in preparing students. Jenny, I'll go to you real quick because I think that's one familiar with many of us is, the dealing with international students or engaging international students, I should say. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we at School of Ed, we launched in a program where students from China, and now it's more targeted, I think it's opened up to just Asia, but where students from China came over to learn. It was a global leadership in education program, and then they would go back and teach. It was designed to have the students learn here, take the courses here, and then go back and teach in their home country. And while they were here, I think it was challenging to get to have them engage with other students. So we did a couple of events, kind of like icebreaker social, more kind of socially, events that had a little bit more of a social kind of aspect to them. And it helped a little bit, but I felt like those students in that program were really kind of separated from the rest of the students. And I thought, what are some ways to engage them more? And some of it was their schedule.
Yeah.
They were
Yep.
in classes during the day and other students were there in the evening. So,
Mhm.
What types of events or things we could do to engage them more.
Got it. Well, it sounds like Brittany puts up there in the chat, and it seems like I think Rebecca kind of said the same thing. And, so I think we all kind of see that as something we can all try to work at.
Yeah, Jenny, that reminded me, we did an international student talkback session a couple of weeks ago in partnership with our IDARE team, and the feedback there was that the career support was often very domestically focused. And so for international students, there didn't seem to be as many opportunities to learn about employment back in their home country, employment at a more global perspective. And then the other question was, or resources for OPT, so extending that visa and getting sponsorship, which I know is is a major part of our international students' experience post-graduation. So thanks for that reminder, Jenny. That didn't pop in my mind, but.
Anybody, anything that they've written up here, just to give more information about, or just say it's really important, they think. So I see the thing about like the soft skills or the writing skills. I think Brittany, you put in there. Also too, students maybe quite not knowing what, the different types of things that they can access resource-wise, or what Handshake is, or something like that. So just any reactions that's here.
I think one of the things I've seen since my transition from Homewood to East Baltimore is the just major difference in those soft skill resources for our students. So if a student in East Baltimore needs support for writing, there are very limited options for them. We have some partnership with a writing support team at Homewood, but they have to be really extreme cases, and I have to get them to sign this full disclaimer. I have a meeting actually with nursing soon to talk about the Learning Collaborative and some of those resources and whether or not those are appropriate. But I just saw kind of over and over again the need for support for populations of students in some of that soft skill development. And not just that, but even like what is professionalism, how to conduct yourself in a workplace. And those are just kind of soft skills I think we've maybe assumed our students have, that they don't, and then when they don't, we don't really have a place to turn them. We just sort of are relying on their faculty to try and coach them, which they're not always specialized in doing.
Got it. So Laura, you had someone that inconsistently invited to speak in classes. Is that like you being invited to talk to students?
Yeah, invited by the faculty. So, I mean, there are no programs. There are very few programs for which we have any required presence. So, I mean, there's no required professional development course across the board. Some of our degree tracks have, where like the academic staff, say our doctoral students, they might have something called an immersion, especially for our distant students, where it's like 2 to 3 days a year where they come to campus. And so my office generally is a part of those. But for most of our programs, some years we're invited to things like that, some years we're not. And so, it's hard, like we don't have it really much set times where we are guaranteed that we're going to reach particular students. And some years it's, like I said, we've been invited and then maybe like admin staff changes over and just things get lost and I reach out and it doesn't go anywhere. Or just as we continue to add new programs, I feel like I'm constantly advocating to give us even 20 minutes to come in and introduce ourselves to the students and share a bit about what the Career Lab is. And then especially for our master's students, which, is like our first time nurses that need a ton of support and that tend to use us the most. That's where I really wish we had required time, and we're at least invited, and we're invited every year, but it's like we get less time every year when I feel like the students' questions grow and the time increases.
Yep. And I think you bring up a good point, and I think it'll lead well into like the second part of kind of building in the rationale for why certain things are important, when they are, and how to do it and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's a great point that you make there. All right, let's go to the last one just real quickly before we jump into like the current state, future state stuff. So just quick reactions here to like the opportunities that exist. So chances to think differently about stuff or things like that. So anything that you can think about here.
I guess just to further explain one of my notes. So we do have like in April, we organized a session for OAS. Just to come in and they're going to do a presentation to all of our advisors, because we've been noticing that, especially when it comes to international students, when it comes to like visas and how requirements have changed, whether on their on campus, with COVID policies changing. And a lot of professors are eager to attend it and said they've been waiting for this kind of session for a while because they want to be knowledgeable on this thing. And I think just that kind of overall speaks to how it's very common in higher ed where things get very siloed. But we all are a team to support the students. And so I think just the more we can do to help break down those silos and say if one office is doing this with their students, okay, well, can that also be done with population students over here? Or can we partner, finding out if people have the same goals for things, then let's partner up, let's collaborate on things so that way students do see that it's not just one office who can help, but all these resources in one place can be there for them in that way. Especially not say if someone's doing an event. It's always silly when it's like, oh, you did that event, or we're gonna do that too in 2 weeks from now. It's like, well, we could have done together and then
exactly.
more money saved and resources put together.
I
think just definitely making sure that we can work on bridging those gaps between different departments and build that collaboration partnership. Kind of if you feel what Laura was saying, from the get-go, let's work together. There's no sides to this whole thing. It's just
Well, and it's also too, it's kind of the idea of letting the left hand know what the right hand's kind of doing type of stuff, so that you can, because it's content that's being shared could be useful no matter the audience, but you could kind of consolidate and reduce redundancy if possible. Okay, well, let's go, let's just jump to the next part of this. So we now want to do kind of the same thing. Now this here, just as you can kind of see, it's a little bit harder to see, but this is just to kind of give you the visual of kind of thinking about it, of kind of like a timeline for students. So what we kind of looked at is that we know all students will have an end. So everybody will graduate, everybody has to start, and then there's a bunch of things kind of in the middle. And those times can be broken up into different things based on your school and the type of students that you're kind of seeing. But we know everybody's going to finish. We know everybody's going to start. But now what we're going to kind of ask you to be thinking about and answering the next set of questions is going to be in a current state with what's going on right now. What do you think are the most impactful touch points for a student from pre-JHU to orientation? And so we're kind of loosely defining this timeline of the time that the student is admitted, accepts admission, to the day that they might come in for orientation. So think about and during an orientation activities that go on within your school. So just kind of think about those for maybe about a minute, maybe like a minute and a half at most. And then we'll go into the next question, but just think about what do you think are important, kind of touch points for a student in this pre-orientation to orientation timeframe.
And if you don't have anything, that's perfectly okay. That's something that we wanted to say, like we recognize not everybody has programming that's happening at all points and such. So if you don't have anything to add, that is perfectly okay. Just kind of put down what the current state is, because we will have time for you to put down the future state of things that you could do as well. So I think Paul will start his timer, and then
Yep.
we'll have about a minute and a half.
Grammarly does more than catch errors. With Grammarly, you can
And this is on slide 5.
All right. So now we're going to ask you to go to the next slide. And now we want you to be thinking about, from a current state, what are the most impactful touch points for the midpoint of a student journey? So between orientation up to a midpoint, what are the things that you think are important things that a student has been getting or that have been important things that they should be doing in this kind of time frame? So again, from time they only started to about halfway through their program and whatever it is that they're doing. And again, can't think of anything here, that's fine. And we'll get a chance to talk a little bit about future state as well. We'll take about a minute and a half for that. All right, so now we'll go to the next one. And let's see where we at. So now we want you to be thinking about current state for students in terms of currently what's kind of going on. and what are the more impactful touch points for students as they go from the midpoint of their student journey to graduation. So this could be a couple months before graduation, a month before graduation, or any point halfway through their journey at the school. What do you think are important and impactful touch points? And we'll do about a minute and a half here as well. All right, so that's great. So now we're gonna want to kind of shift your thinking towards the future state of what you would like to be able to see. So if you go to the next slide, it's the same question. So what are additional touch points? So you thought about the current state. What would be things that your touch points that your office could have from the pre-JHU to orientation or through orientation timeframe for a student journey? So this is this idea too, if you kind of think of it as, what is your dream big type of thing? What would you love to be able to kind of see have happen? So if you've thought about these things, or you would love to be able to try something, what would be those things that you would like to see happen in that same time frame? And we'll do about a minute and a half here as well.
And I would just encourage, don't limit yourself with resources, with time, with people to do it, like pie in the sky, like perfect scenario type things. We'd love to hear.
So yeah, thank you for thinking about kind of future state stuff. We're going to sorry. So continue with the idea of the future state and also what we're kind of thinking in terms of the same time frame from the orientation to the midpoint of a student's journey. What do you think are things that would be important touch points for them that our various offices could have as support to them? So think a little bit about that, put some of them down in your sticky notes, and then we'll, after a minute and a half, we'll go to the last one as well. And then we'll spend the rest of the time reflecting on what's here. All right. So now just over to our last slide. What are the points again? Future state, thinking about it from midpoint to graduation along the student journey. What are the things that you would like to be doing or that we could be doing more of in our respective areas that we could, be important touch points for students? So thinking about it from halfway through the program towards the end, you can even think about it like third of the way through the program or 3/4 of the way through the program, whatever point that you think it may be. If we can do a minute and a half just thinking about those things. Okay, perfect. All right, so I know we've given you a lot to think about, 6 very kind of thought-provoking questions in a very short amount of time. And maybe you haven't yet even had a chance to kind of think through these things or, you know, have given it much thought. So I'll follow up afterwards and send you these questions again. So if there's more things you want to add to what you have there, please feel free to do. But I think for our remaining time, I would love to kind of talk about some of the future state items that were there. So Jess, could you share your screen? Thanks. So if we go to like the first kind of future state things of, you know, what are the, you know, thoughts of things that we could be doing from pre-orientation to orientation. And so let's see, meet our class. Yeah. Workshops in diversity and inclusion, that would be great. Does anybody want to talk a little bit more about what they kind of have here or anything like that? Mandatory sessions. Does anybody see something here like, oh, that's a great idea, that's an idea I didn't think about, it maybe we could think about using within our area? So I'll point out, Jenny, I think Jenny, your point about the diversity and inclusion kind of type of things, to show students, you know, that we are a diverse workplace. You know, I think that would be good. It's you know, as something that students can see that we're kind of doing.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
and I think that would also include students with disabilities, of course, you know,
Yep.
so part of it, diversity, so they can understand and maybe just engage with more diverse populations when they leave school and go out into the working world.
Got it. I forget who was yellow. Is that you,
Rebecca.
Rebecca? Yeah.
That was-
So you say here that during the Zoom orientation, you know, people sharing their LinkedIn profiles.
Yes, yeah, when we had our orientation for all new students that started this semester. Yeah, it was really cool to see that they all of a sudden in the chat just blew up with everyone saying, here's my city, here's my LinkedIn profile. And I think this goes back to thinking like, you know, oh, like people only want to be social like when they're undergrad, but no, grad students too like want to have that level of connection with their peers. I think that, you know, I think peers are part of the support system too. And so I think that happened organically, but providing more opportunities like in that free time to allow people to build that classmate network. And, you know, in the past when I was in school, it was Facebook groups, but, you know,
Right.
we already have social media tools that we already use. Like, you know, if there's an option to use with, you know, I think there's an option with Handshake, but like using, if we already have apps that we want them to use when they're with us throughout the 2 years or however long they're with us,
Mhm.
then maybe we can use those apps like, hey, here's a social piece. And then later we'd be like, hey, so hey, remember when you were kind of going with your classmates? Same app, but here's
Yep.
stuff to use now that you're preparing for, you know, applying for jobs and stuff like that.
Great. Awesome. All right. All right, if we can go to the next one. So what are some touch points that we think are important from orientation to the midpoint of a student journey? So, you know, again, the idea of some sort of a co-curricular thing that all students would be required to do, some writing support, you know, a way to be able to share information with students, you know, maybe have theme weeks of stuff. I think that would be great. So it's just, you know, having that, it sounds to me, it's kind of like this sense of kind of exposing students to all the different things that can kind of be there. If it could be in the way of doing it as a course, because that's what a lot of students would be familiar with, but maybe more being able to just, you know, have kind of dedicated expectations of what students could be doing to know about kind of what's there to either elevate or raise the profile of what goes on within our offices. I think that's great. And then the last one, can we just go to that one real quick? So I think here, with this one, this is, I think for many of us where we find like, there is a lot of things either that are pushed to students to kind of do and things like that, or, but if we can, be thinking about, so we have here job shadowing programs, I think is good. Schedule meetings with students to review their resumes as they're applying for things. Maybe a dedicated alumni mentor, I think that would be, kind of a great thing to have too. So yeah, I think all these are really excellent ideas. So I want to be respectful of everybody's time, and I want to say thank you all for participating in this. I think we could probably have this conversation that lasts an hour or longer and things like that. But if at any point you feel like you maybe want to speak with our team, with myself, Jess, or Jessica, please reach out to us because we can do a follow-up meeting to kind of go over anything that we maybe didn't get a chance to talk about. In terms of just next steps, we will let you know that as we put together all the information that we're getting, we're going to put it all together and give back out to everybody that participates in these focus groups a chance to review the draft of that kind of report, just to gather feedback before we make any type of presentation anywhere. So those are our planned next steps. And then after that, we will, like I say, be doing the presentations to various parts of ILLD. Our hope, fingers crossed, is to get this done by April, but we'll see how much feedback we get from everybody. But again, we appreciate all of your time here today and joining this focus group.
Yeah, I would just say thank you so much. We definitely appreciate it. And end of April, not beginning, because that's a week.
Right.
So
Exactly.
but have a great rest of your week.
Bye, everyone.
Hey, Paul or Jess,
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just curious, have the student focus groups been scheduled yet?
Yes.